Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another wonderful episode of Help for the Guild List. My name is Antwon, and I am here to talk about what is up on my screen right now, which happens to be Ghostbusters 2016. Now, I'm talking about this now because it happens to be July 21st, and, well, the opening weekend was last weekend. So, not only are the totals in, but the numbers are in, and, oh... oh my, oh my, oh my. So, I have a couple of reviews to go over. One I couldn't get actually to show up, but I'll go over it anyway. It's the Chicago Sun-Times review that started the whole thing. I will put the link in the description. And, well, I have one coming from one of my favorite websites, which happens to be aggressivecomics.com, and I'll put that in the description as well as IMDb, just the user reviews. So what are we going to discuss first? Well, the first thing we're going to discuss is numbers. I love numbers. There are nothing that you can eschew from numbers. Now, how much did this movie make to date, as of July 21st, 2016, from its opening weekend? Well, as we can see here, the numbers are not very good. You see, it had a production budget of $144 million, and as of right now, domestic, it has made $57.2 million, and foreign $18.1 million. So worldwide, we are talking about $75.3 million. And it's only going to go down from here. Most movies lose about 70% of their revenue on the second weekend. We saw it happen with Batman vs. Superman, and we also saw it happen with Civil War. Except their opening weekends were, well, blockbuster weekends. This, on the other hand, is not. Now, to give it, I would say, some credence, it did end up this weekend at number 2, being completely and utterly blown out by The Secret Life of Pets. But as we've seen, there is nothing coming out right now that, well, is worth its salt. I think the only thing it was really going up against, besides The Secret Life of Pets, was Independence Day Resurgence, and that did not do as well as they had hoped because of the fact that no one wanted it. Anyway, so these are the numbers right here, and this shows you what it means to have a feminist ideology pushed onto the people who have seen the preview and do not want to see the movie. And that was the thing. It was, well, being hearkened as a feminist goal. It was, a political act to see this movie. And of course, having it do that was complete and utter garbage. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the Aggressive Comics review. And that actually sums up quite a bit. Now I have a spot here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I just want to talk about what has been going on. Now, that right there, spoiler alert, of course, is the villain. And I'll get to that in a second. His name is Rowan. So, this is from Aggressive Comics, who is a very well-known geek culture site. So, this is being taken from halfway already down. They're talking about Chris Helmsworth and Neil Casey. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to give my comments on it. The new Ghostbusters story has some promise. Professional women coming together to study something that they all have an interest in. The dialogue is boring and not funny. The majority of laughs comes from the repetition of someone else's lines, and Chris Helmsworth's character being completely inept. I get that this is meant to be a big biting of the thumb at the normal thing of having a hot ditzy secretary. But Janine in the original wasn't this stupid, and I want to point that out. Janine was not a sex object. She was not anything but what she was. She was she was the one that controlled the Ghostbusters. She gave them their money, told them where to go, answered the phones, and dealt with the people. She was the face that people had to deal with. She was PR, and she happened to be someone you could look up to because she took no shit from anyone. And in the second movie, she was in control of her sexuality and going after Rick Moranis' character. And she wasn't ever played as ditzy, stupid, or a sex object. And that's exactly what Chris Hemsworth is being played for here. And it's not a good thing. But I will continue. Going on to comedian Neil Casey plays the unmotivated villain Rowan North, a disgruntled, I guess, bellhop from the Mikado Hotel. He builds a giant Tesla-esque machine in an effort to supercharge the ley lines of New York City, which will cause the barrier between the spiritual realm and the current realm to crash down, releasing ghosts in droves. We never find out why he wants to do this, although it's implied that yes, he is crazy. And yes, he's been bullied and picked on. He has no real reason why he wants to do this thing. And that is a great comment. Now, when the Ghostbusters went up against Gozer, they weren't told who the villain was. They just knew that there was an increase in spiritual activity. They had more jobs than they could handle, which is why they actually hired Winston, because then they could split up in 2 teams of 2. And, well, you didn't find out until the big reveal of the 2 characters played by Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis get possessed. Then we find out what's going on. Lewis is the keymaster. Dana is the gatekeeper. They figure it out by, interrogating Lewis, who happens to be possessed, and he tells them what's going to happen. And in a very, very strange turn of events, after it's all said and done, they turn into dogs. And Gozer shows up and is, well, the Russian gymnast, as we all know Gozer to be. And, spoiler alert, they do harken back to make your choice of what my final form will be for Rowan. Except Rowan isn't given a motivation to be the bad guy. He's just there. And it's horrible and horrifying. And he's unmotivated. So this is a fail. But let's go on to some IMDb reviews. People are generally good about what they have to say. So let's take a look. Oh, well, right there at the top with a 1-star, terrible, unfunny, man-hating mess from someone named Gizmo. Well, Gizmo has a lot to say, apparently, and I don't know if I'm going to talk about everything he has. Well, it's not that long of a review, why not? Heralded by the most disliked trailer in YouTube history, and an embargo on reviews until pretty much the day of release by a panicked Sony Studios. The Heaven's Gate of supernatural horror comedies is finally here, and what a terrible, unfunny, man-hating mess it is. Yes, there was a review embargo. What that means is that they were not allowed to actually release a review that they had written until the day of. Now, why is this happening? They weren't allowed to release them until the day of the premiere. Most of the time when a movie does this, it's because they don't want the bad press. And it's kind of like a damage control. And in this case, it is damage control. So, no one was able to do a review until I believe the Thursday that it was going to come out. So, like Paul Feig's previous movie, The Heat, this appears to be nothing more than a comedy with all the comedy taken out. No jokes, no discernible plot to speak of, no memorable or likable characters, terrible CGI, possibly the worst theme song ever penned. Then, on top of that, the only black woman in this thing is a hell no racial stereotype 40 years old out of date. And all the men, without a single exception, are exclusively depicted as either stupid or evil. And that was another problem that a lot of people had. Paul Feig apparently was bullied while he was younger, and this was his feminist swan song, showing every man that is in this movie to be either inept or, well, evil. And that's not something that happened in the original Ghostbusters. There was one man that you saw as the villain, and that was Walter Peck. And unfortunately, Bill Murray's character happens to kind of be that character of this movie. Fortunately, the Ghostbusters get away with murder by releasing a ghost to prove that the ghosts are real, and that ghost promptly kills Bill Murray's cameo, who happens to be the mayor, so yes, that's always good. I honestly hope this abomination is such a flop it sinks the studio. I don't hope it sinks Sony. Sony has quite a few things that I'd like to have happen, but... And so ever after acts of a warning to future filmmakers not to cynically exploit beloved movies from the past for short-term gain or presently fashionable political brownie points, but maybe instead of trying to make memorable movies of lasting magic and worth themselves. That is kind of the sentiment that people have been going on about. Now, this one says dead on arrival. It's also 1 star, contains more spoilers. This thing is extraordinarily long. I'm not going to read that. But, here we go. 2-star review. 2. And this is from Keith Benesek. I hope I'm saying that right. Is all they could do is rip off the original classic. Despite what you hear from a few movie critics, in quotes, that are notorious for selling payola their reviews to the highest studio bidder, the new Ghostbusters, starring Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, and Saturday Night Live standouts Kate McKinnon and Leslie Jones, is horrible. We had a media showing last night, and I thought I was going to be sick. The pace of the film is like molasses, which is actually saying something, since Batman vs. Superman was like molasses in the middle of Alaska during their coldest winter. The editing is amateur choppy, the acting is slapstick, and the comedy is extra soft porn SNL. Yes, I went in with considerable apprehension, but came out with a severe case of stomach cramps. As I said, the acting is abysmal. Ooh, that's a good word. Except marginally for Kristen Wiig, but that doesn't save this yawner. Melissa McCarthy has clearly become the female Adam Sandler, Mike Myers, David Spade, at his most obnoxious, and we can only hope that McCarthy fade into obscurity like the 3 aforementioned soon. Adam Sandler, I wouldn't say is faded from existence, and neither is David Spade. Mike Myers is still... Well, the last thing he did was Shrek, so yes. For a reboot of a classic, this film is pathetic. Ghostbuster tampons is not worth your hard-earned money for the price of the theater ticket. If you must see it, wait till you get it free. Wait till it is on your free HBO or Showtime package. There's nothing else on PBS reruns. And that is The View from the Balcony and all other legal BS 2016. And this next one, again, look at this. This is people actually putting in their 2 cents. This one had points, 10 points to be exact. I'm going to read this one, but I'm going to move on after this. This one looks actually quite interesting. So, this is from Girly Card L. And she said, this movie made me so sad. 1 star. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to try and make this as least hostile as possible. Oh, we're off to a horrible start for reviews, aren't we? But when a movie is this hypocritical, bigoted, and ignorant, there is nothing good that can be said about it, except for the people who are literally bribed into writing positive reviews. And I have come across a few positive reviews. Some of them, I would actually say, are meh reviews. They're not positive, they're not negative, because they didn't want to touch this cesspool of a movie. They didn't want to upset feminists and SJWs, and they didn't want to upset the rest of the world. So, I haven't seen many positive reviews. This movie was stolen. This is number one, by the way. This movie was stolen. Everything in this movie was stolen from the first two. All they did was literally take the first movie and remove action parts and the horror parts. And that, again, is what I have heard. I have heard that this movie did not try to be its own movie, which is quite sad. They could have done so much there that it boggles the mind why they thought they had to throw back to the old movies when this is supposed to be a reboot. Yes, you can have little nods, like the four... Actually, I think there are 6 cameos. You can have those. You can have nods to what happened in the first movie, but don't blatantly rip it off. Like having the Steak Puft Marshmallow Man as a Thanksgiving Day balloon of some sort, and it come alive. The sexism. This is number 2. This movie is probably the most sexist movie since Doomsday Machine. They replaced the entire main cast with only women to appeal to the radical feminists. When your ideology discriminates against who you can cast in a role, that is called fascism. And it's not a good thing. This is from Girly Cobb. I'm assuming this is a woman. So she apparently does not like the ideology that this went through. Number 3, the bland, lobotomized token male, which again I've heard so much about this character. Pretty much the only main character who was a man was turned into a stereotype. He was useless, annoying, fake, and had an IQ below sea level, and was clearly trying to pretend to be Brad Pitt, but with none of the acting talent. He only got hired because of his looks, which again I talk about with Janine. She was not hired for her looks. She was hired because they needed someone. Number 4, the racism. The only black character was turned into a loud, annoying, street-smart stereotype. Well, yes, the CGI was terrible and very cartoon-like. Daffy Duck, the early years. Ooh. This is not boding well. And I still have one more review to go through from an actual well-known critic. I wanted to do this, making it so you would maybe want to see this movie, but from 2 websites so far, I don't think it's possible. Number 6, the acting. Not one single main character in the movie could act. Not one. It looked like grade school drama club. Oh, you poor people. Alright, number 7, the comedy, in quotes even. Every single joke fell flat. I didn't laugh once at anything they said. Many of the jokes were sexist too. The trailer is a perfect summary of the movie. Every single joke was dumbed down because Paul Feig has no respect for his audience, which is true. He called the people who hated on the trailer sexist, misogynistic shitlords. Well, we're the ones that want to see your movie, and you're shitting on us. And I heard that the very first joke is a queefing joke. Now, the original Ghostbusters had jokes in it, but it was played straight. That's where the comedy came from. It wasn't slapstick in the least. Yes, there were funny parts, but this was played up as a horror movie. And, well, this has been turned into a family-friendly comedy. And again, comedy in quotes. Number 8, the entitlement. The cast and director have been throwing a hissy fit ever since people saw what garbage the first trailer was. They have been trying to claim that people who don't like the movie are sexists. No, and no. People who think they are entitled to success because of their gender are sexist, which is true. The cast of this movie is sexist. The director of this movie is sexist. The people who hate this movie are not sexist. Actually, they're normal people. They're fans, they are moviegoers, they are the non-18% of people in this country who do not call themselves feminist. 9. So boring. This movie didn't take any chances, and it didn't expand on the Ghostbusters universe in any way. Number 10. The product placement. It was everywhere. There might not have been a single scene where they weren't advertising something in the background. It made me long for the days of Food Fight. Oh, ouch. If you don't know what Food Fight is, look up the Nostalgia Critic on YouTube, and he has an amazing review of Food Fight. In conclusion, nobody should ever give their money to these lazy, fat cats again. I, for one, am never buying another Sony product in my life, and if you pay to see this movie, you are a bad person. Again, her name is Girly Card L, so I'm assuming this is a woman. So yes, that's some bad stuff, I would think. Now, I'm going to talk about the Chicago Sun-Times. And this was shared on the Facebook page by Cole, and that's because they think he actually has kind of some kinship to it, because his parents were actually from Chicago. So they used to read the Chicago Sun-Times, and I happen to know when he was a little kid, he used to actually watch Siskel and Ebert, and Roger Ebert happened to be the movie critic for the Chicago Sun-Times until he passed it on to Richard Roper after he died. Now this, I know I've been going on for quite a bit, but this I'm going to tell you. I am going to read word for word, because Richard Roper is a god amongst critics. So, the headline reads, and I'm going to put the link in the description so you can read it yourself. It says, Ghostbusters reboot, a horrifying mess. So bad. Ghostbusters is a horror from start to finish, and that's not me saying it's legitimately scary. More like I was horrified by what was transpiring on screen. How could so many talented, well-meaning artists who clearly loved and respected the original produce such a raggedy-looking, thuddingly unfunny, utterly unnecessary reboot? 1, 2, 3, that's 3 U's in a row. That's actually really very good. For months, the controversy has swirled around the new Ghostbusters movie. The trailer was reportedly the most hated in YouTube history, for what it's worth, or not worth, which led to some pundits saying some of the hate was rooted in sexism. Now, I do give him credit, because that's all he talks about. That's all he says about the sexism. He doesn't defend it, he doesn't accuse it of anything. So good on him. Others said the fact that Leslie Jones' character wasn't a scientist and seemed to have a role that called for her to play into stereotypes smacked of racism. Yes. Yes, it did. Of course, people were voicing these opinions without having seen the entire movie. Well, I have seen it, and while I believe the concerns about racial stereotypes were overblown, Ghostbusters is one of the worst movies of the year for multiple other reasons, including bad acting, uninspiring directing, editing, cinematography and music, cheesy special effects, a forgettable villain, and a terrible script. Worst movie of the year. We are more than halfway through the year. Let's go ahead and issue the obligatory spoiler alert. Later in this review, I will be discussing the nature of the cameos by some of the cast members from the original Ghostbusters. You have been warned. I will be putting spoiler in the title, so yes, there are spoilers. The 2016 edition of Ghostbusters is not a sequel or a remake per se. While there are multiple visual and musical nods to the 1984 classic, to the point of distraction, this is a standalone disaster. One indication this story takes place in the same universe occupied by the original Ghostbusters. We catch a glimpse of a bust of the late great Harold Ramis, Egon Spengler's character. In present day New York City, Kristen Wiig's Erin is an uptight academic trying to distance herself from her college days when she and her best friend Abby, Melissa McCarthy, published a book claiming ghosts were real. Erin and Abby are estranged, but they reunite via plot device when honest-to-ghostness operations surface in New York, creating all sorts of evil mischiefs. Now, I want to say this. There have been reviews coming out that saying it doesn't feel like New York City. It doesn't feel like it did in the original Ghostbusters, or actually any other New York-based movie. And the reason why is because this was all filmed in Boston. So if you don't see any New York landmarks, that's the reason why, because they're not in New York. Wig and McCarthy co-starred in Bridesmaids, directed by the usually terrific Paul Feig, who is at the helm here. And I will say this, I did enjoy The Heat, I did enjoy Bridesmaids, and I did enjoy Spy, so I don't know why this movie was so shit. That's my words, not his. I don't want to think that he put shit in an actual newspaper. And there are enormously charismatic and versatile screen actors, which make it all the more disappointing to see them flounder separately and together here. They are both surprisingly muted and flat. Then again, better understated than insanely over the top, which is what we get from Kate McKinnon as Holtzman, the wacky scientist of the bunch. McKinnon is so good on Saturday Night Live, but she absolutely butchers her performance in this film, mugging for the camera, bouncing around in an exaggerated manner as if she's in Three Stooges short, and drawing attention to herself when the scene calls for her to react and not engage in wholesale attention-getting thievery. From what I've heard, she chews the scenery like a bad dog. Jones is loud and unsubtle as an MTA worker named Patty who becomes the fourth Ghostbuster. But I'm not sure there's a way to deliver lines such as "oh hell no" without going big. Now, I do want to admit that yes, Winston was not a scientist when he first joined the Ghostbusters. If you follow the story, and if you follow the movies, and you follow the cartoons, Winston actually goes and gets his PhD and becomes a scientist. So he does become one. That's why in the original preview, when it said 4 scientists did this, because they are taking on the fact that in canon, Winston became a scientist. Chris Helmsworth further drags down the proceedings as their receptionist, Kevin, who is monumentally stupid. I see a theme here. But also narcissistic and annoying. Helmsworth tries too hard to be funny instead of creating a legitimately funny character. Doesn't help matters that Wig's Erin is so smitten with this dope she can barely think straight around him. Now, if you remember in the original Ghostbusters and in the cartoons, Janine did have a thing for Egon. And Annie Potts played Janine to the point of she was kind of drooling on Egon at the beginning. But she moved on to Lewis when she saw that Egon wasn't in the mood, or paying attention to something other than his bugs. So the fact that, one, they've made Janine's replacement a dumb blonde and nothing but eye candy, they are also making it they are accentuating the fact that Erin is so smitten that she can't think straight. At least in the original movie, Janine was in control of that conversation. As for those wildly hyped cameos by the original Ghostbusters cast members Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Annie Potts, and once again, spoiler alert, they don't play older versions of their characters. They are just wedged into the story as irrelevant, plot-stopping cameos. Dan Aykroyd saying "I ain't afraid of no ghosts" isn't a clever homage to the original. It's a self-conscious and cloying wink that serves no real purpose. The special effects in Ghostbusters are so mediocre, I'm wondering if they're a nod to the relatively crude effects of 1984, or maybe they're not just very good. And I want to say, if you watch Ghostbusters from 1984 now, the effects still do relatively decently. Yes, there are some parts where you're like, well, that was horrible, but they used real effects. They didn't have CGI. They had it, but they didn't have all the CGI that they have now. The ghosts aren't frightening, and they are not funny, and they have almost no backstory. They're just hissing, hateful, murderous creatures storming through the city. Neil Casey plays the movie's villain, a creepy hotel janitor named Rowan. He is one of the most forgettable villains of any movie I've ever seen. I'm already forgetting his name as I finish this paragraph. That's sad. Andy Garcia does what he can as his role as the mayor of New York, who is in deep denial about the whole ghost thing. It's a pale imitation of William Atherton's fantastic work as Walter Peck in the EPA official who tried to shut down the Ghostbusters in the 1984 film. From multiple visual references to the iconic logo to a new take on the catchy Ray Parker Jr. by way of Huey Lewis theme song to the appearance of some very familiar ghosts to the aforementioned cameos, Ghostbusters keeps telling us, yes, we know we are revisiting a classic. Some things are better left alone. Well, damn. Damn. That is a horrible review. And you know what? I know most people are going into this movie thinking, it can't be that bad. It is. Richard Roeper, who happens to be a very well-known and honest critic, tore this movie apart. People who went to go see it and did reviews on IMDb tore this movie apart. The fact that they spoke with their wallets means so much. I'm going to be checking up on the numbers after this weekend to see how far it fell flat. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you one of the worst remakes of all time. And unfortunately, we saw this coming. It's rated PG-13, and I can guarantee you only people under the age of 13 are going to find it entertaining. Now, if it does give you need to put on a proton pack as a little girl, fine. If it does pique your interest in Ghostbusters and makes you want to see the original, good. But as for what this piece of garbage is, I'd say it's done its job and it needs to be put down. So, do I plan on seeing this movie? Of course not. If it happens to be on Redbox and there's nothing on Hulu or Netflix or even cable TV, I may rent it. But other than that, I don't care. Which is sad, really, because they're talking about sequels that are never going to come. The merchandise was already on the clearance rack before the movie was out. This movie was going to be a stinker no matter what. So, I don't even have to do a review of the movie. I'm letting the reviewers speak for themselves. My name is Antwon, and thank you for joining me on this, well, biting review of Ghostbusters 2016. And I hope that the next few coming months I'll have more in it than, well, this. We have a bunch of films coming out that I'm looking forward to. Suicide Squad is coming and I'm going to go see it. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. And good morrow.